Imagine if electrical power suddenly went out for millions of people, and not just for hours, but for months, maybe even years, throwing our world into chaos, crippling everything from communication to food and water distribution. It sounds like the start of a post-apocalyptic movie, but there's a real possibility that it could happen. It's called a low probability, high consequence event. A massive solar storm could knock out electrical power and wreak havoc on nearly every aspect of modern life, but it's not something we're really preparing for, because for most of us, it just doesn't register as a big threat. But here's the thing, it's happened before. We've had glimpses of what this can do to modern technology. In 1989, it hit Canada's province of Quebec, damaging electrical transformers and leaving 3 million people without electricity. And we had a pretty big scare in 2012.
The electric power grid would be wiped out by the current. Lights and computers, transportation, hospitals, all would go down. The study warns it would be a disaster, far worse than anything we have seen before.
It ended up passing through Earth's orbit and missing the Earth by a margin of 9 days. But had it hit us, we might still be picking up the pieces years later. Particularly bad solar flares and CMEs can cause real havoc to our electrical systems, potentially throwing large parts of the world into darkness. It would take months or years to fully repair and replace damaged infrastructure. And the consequences of that, far-reaching and devastating.
When you talk about geomagnetics, the measurement, the unit of measure, if you will, is called a kp. We hover normally at around 2-3 kp. When there's a geomagnetic storm, so when the kp hits 8, 9, there are huge physical effects, psychological effects, emotional effects. It's very well established science now. What a lot of people don't know is that when the magnetic field of the planet drops to 0, it's the same effects. Heart attacks, suicides, strokes, psychotic breakdowns, right? These type of things are now becoming very, very well known, to the point of, like I said, I've had friends, got quite a few friends in the medical industry talking about being in the hospitals and they're being flooded with heart patients. And the doctors are like, we don't even know what to do. Like, there's this many people are coming in with myocardial infarctions, heart attacks, coming in with arrhythmia, where all of a sudden their hearts are just pounding, et cetera, et cetera. This is geomagnetic. We can't deny it.
El pasado mes de marzo, una serie de apagones masivos provocaron el caos en Venezuela, dejando a toda su población sin luz durante varios días. Los fallos eléctricos, los más grandes hasta ahora en la historia del país, afectaron especialmente a hospitales, clínicas y medios de transporte y ocasionaron saqueos y graves problemas en el abastecimiento de agua. Aunque la Corporación Eléctrica Nacional atribuyó el caos a una total falta de mantenimiento de los sistemas, el gobierno de Maduro apuntó directamente a un sabotaje estadounidense destinado a empeorar la situación del país, inmerso ya en una crisis política, económica y social. Una acusación sin pruebas, basada sin embargo en la existencia real de armas devastadoras, capaces de inutilizar todo tipo de infraestructuras y de conducir a un país al desastre. El pasado 26 de marzo, Donald Trump firmó un decreto que ordena a las agencias federales identificar las amenazas planteadas por impulsos electromagnéticos en infraestructuras críticas estadounidenses. Sin embargo, pocos analistas se atreven a aventurar qué clase de armamento podrían estar utilizando ya los militares de los países más avanzados. Los expertos definen estos dispositivos como armas silenciosas para guerras ocultas.
Lo que pasa es que es muy difícil atribuir, la atribución de este tipo de ataques, tremendamente difícil, precisamente porque estamos hablando de esta guerra invisible, esta guerra que se nos escapa, de la que no somos conscientes, incruenta, pero que puede llegar a destruir completamente un país. Es que algunos pudieron ser simplemente sabotajes, incendios, corte de cables, otros pudieron ser hackeos, es decir, ciberataques, pero también algunos pudieron ser pura guerra electrónica, guerra electromagnética, para mediante sistemas electromagnéticos anular, poner fuera de combate, por así decirlo, todos los sistemas eléctricos. Esto lo hizo Estados Unidos lanzando bombas de grafito en la primera guerra del Golfo contra Irak, que consiguió anular durante bastante tiempo, ni más ni menos que el 85% del todo suministro eléctrico iraquí. Pero es que posteriormente, en 1999, en el marco de la guerra de Kosovo, atacando Serbia, consiguió anular al 70% de todo el sistema eléctrico serbio con bombas de grafito. Estamos hablando que si tú acabas con el sistema eléctrico, y más hoy en día, de un país, has acabado. Suministro de agua, suministro de gas, suministro de, por supuesto, de electricidad, lo primero, pero es que has acabado prácticamente con el país. Inmediatamente la población se sublevaría contra los gobernantes y habrías creado el caos absoluto. Porque además es una cosa muy curiosa, porque como todas estas armas se consideran armas no letales, porque no son cruentas, no generan sangre, por así decirlo, resulta que no están reguladas por ningún convenio de ninguna naturaleza. Y entonces, claro, son armas que dices, algunos le llaman la soft bomb, la bomba suave, ¿no? Porque claro, parece como que no causa ningún efecto, no nos damos cuenta, no nos apercibimos de ello. Y como vemos, tiene una capacidad verdaderamente terrible. O sea, su poder es verdaderamente gigantesco.
NSA wanted to impress the Japanese. They were not as thrilled to learn that we wanted them to help us spy on the Japanese population. They said it was against their laws. Of course, we tapped the entire country anyway. And we didn't stop there, because once we owned their communication system, we started going after their physical infrastructure. We'd slip these little sleeper programs into power grids, dams, hospitals, and the idea was if the day came when Japan was no longer an ally, it'd be lights out. And it wasn't just the Japanese. We were planning malware in Mexico, Germany, Brazil, Austria. I mean, China, I can understand, or Russia, or Iran, or Venezuela, okay, but Austria?
Die große Gefahr ist, dass es nicht nur eine Gefahr gibt. Also das heißt, es gibt einerseits naturgegebene Gefahren bei Hochwasser infolge von Stürmen, also all das, was wir eigentlich nicht beeinflussen können. Es geht aber eben auch weiter bis zu Themen, die wir quasi hausgemacht auf die Tagesordnung gebracht haben. Nicht die Energiewende an sich, aber die Art, wie wir die Energiewende betreiben beispielsweise, die nach vielen Expertenmeinungen einfach die Gefahren wesentlich erhöht haben. Braunkohlekraftwerke, die haben eine jährliche Laufzeit von etwa 7.000 Stunden. Im Kernkraftbereich sind wir bei 8.000 Stunden. Im Prinzip sind die immer da, wenn wir sie brauchen. Das sieht bei Sonne und Wind natürlich anders aus, weil wir darauf angewiesen sind, dass die Sonne scheint und dass der Wind weht. Das heißt, wir haben ungefähr bei Solar 1.000 Stunden im Jahr und bei Windkraft 2.000 Stunden im Jahr. Das heißt, ein Bruchteil davon und das natürlich aber auch im Jahreszyklus sehr unterschiedlich. Und das macht im Prinzip übers Jahr gesehen sehr, sehr große Schwankungen aus, die wir kaum beherrscht bekommen. Man sagt, die Untergrenze eines sicheren Netzbetriebes liegt bei 49,8, die Obergrenze bei 50,2. 50 Hertz ist der Sollwert, das ist im Prinzip der Bereich des Üblichen. In dem Bereich darf sich das bewegen, ohne dass wir größere Probleme haben. Das klingt alles ganz wenig, aber in der Technik hat das massive Auswirkungen. Werden diese Werte unter- bzw. überschritten, gibt es eine Regelstrategie, mit welchen Maßnahmen man versuchen kann einzugreifen. Das fängt an bei eben Abschalten von Großverbrauchern oder Hochfahren von Reservekraftwerken oder eben aber auch, wenn wir tatsächlich zu viel Strom im Netz haben, dass wir unseren Strom unbedingt loswerden müssen. Wir reden dann nicht nur darüber, dass wir ihn exportieren, sondern wir reden dafür, dass wir Geld dafür zahlen, dass jemand anderes im Ausland uns den Strom abnimmt. Wir hatten am 10. und am 24. Januar 2 Vorfälle, also jetzt ganz aktuell, die es so seit Jahren in der Form nicht gab. Wir hatten am 10. Januar eine Frequenz von 49,8 Hertz. Also das heißt, wir sind auf die untere Grenze eines sicheren Netzbetriebes abgefallen. Und als wäre das noch nicht genug gewesen, war exakt 2 Wochen später, am 24. Januar, waren wir bei 50,2 auf der Obergrenze eines sicheren Netzbetriebes. Strom und Telekommunikation, also einschließlich Internet, sind heute die Lebensadern unserer Gesellschaft. Ja. Wenn man sich dann anschaut, welche unserer Systeme wie notstromversorgt sind, für welche Dauer, heißt es, nach und nach fällt uns die komplette Infrastruktur aus. Wir haben vielleicht für einen Tag Vorräte und am zweiten Tag bricht in den Städten der Hunger aus. Das sieht vielleicht auf dem Land auch noch mal ein bisschen anders aus, aber zumindest in den Städten, die gewöhnt sind, dass an jeder Ecke irgendwo ein Laden ist, der immer offen hat. Also es gibt viele Faktoren, wir haben vorhin einige angesprochen, die zu einem Blackout führen können, die jeder für sich das Potenzial haben, so zu eskalieren, dass wir eben auch mal die Grenze eines sicheren Netzbetriebes in die eine oder andere Richtung überschreiten können und das nicht mehr eingefangen kriegen. Wir reden über Phänomene, die in der Natur einfach immer wieder vorkommen, gerade beim Thema Sonnensturm, alle 100 Jahre. Jetzt ist der letzte große überfällig seit 1859. Damals war es nur das Telegrafennetz betroffen. Wir wüssten gar nicht, was heute alles passieren würde. Also wir haben heute einen Grad von Abhängigkeit. Es darf uns nicht passieren. Und gleichzeitig sagen aber immer mehr Experten, also es ist nicht mehr die Frage, ob ein Blackout kommt, sondern wann er eintrifft.
In my opinion, Trump's bombastic Twitter threats constitute a serious escalation of military tensions in the Middle East, which could easily lead to a major regional war or even a world war. The United States has never forgiven Iran for overthrowing its puppet, the Shah of Iran, in 1979, and replacing it with an Islamic Democratic Republic and an independent foreign policy and an independent economy. The United States clearly cannot tolerate this, and for years they have been trying to undermine the Iranian government with economic sanctions, with terrorist activities, and it's not as if the United States has clean hands. It has already and once overthrown the government of Iran in 1953, the government of Mr. Mossadegh, which threatened to nationalize the Iranian oil. However, the United States, let's face it, is a rogue state. It has changed regimes in over 80 countries. One cannot rely on anything they say or any documents or treaties they sign. What really should scare people around the world is the fact that the United States has just moved a fleet into the Middle East and is threatening Iran with military force. People who know history know that before the United States enters into an attack on some country, they create some pretext. It makes us extremely worried in the peace movement that the United States is looking for a pretext in order to make war. And let's hope that this is just hot air and they don't actually go through with it, but it's pretty scary.
John Bolton is an architect of war everywhere. This man is a lunatic, and I say that advisedly. I mean, right now, what they're doing is pushing for a new confrontation with Iran, a country of 90 million people, a country that has formidable military forces. The policymakers in Washington, like Bolton, like Pompeo, and including the Democratic Party, who are sort of the tail to their kite now, they're working under this agreement that America may be an empire in decline, but by applying maximum pressure on all of its so-called enemies or adversaries, it will get them to crumble. When you look at what's going on in China, in Venezuela, now against Iran, we have a maximum pressure strategy. And I think what they have behind them is this concept. We are the greatest military power in the world. We may no longer be the greatest economic power, but this power we can assert and exert. It doesn't work, but there's no consequences. These people act with impunity over and over again. Why aren't any of them in jail? They're not even fired. They're actually going around making speeches and making lots of money, in spite of the fact that they had Iraq, Libya, so many other failed policies that killed literally hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of people. Absolute impunity. That's why it keeps happening.
Why did Saudi Arabia, coupled with Israel, push so hard for Trump to walk away from the Iran nuclear deal, although everyone admits that Iran was not in violation, was in fact in complete compliance with that deal.
Saudi Arabia and Israel knew this very well, and their great fear was that there would be a rapprochement between the U.S. and Iran, because they both depend on their exclusive relationships with the United States for their very existence. And if there was a rapprochement with Iran, they would start talking about the exclusive relationship. They would have to, because once you start talking about how are we going to solve the other conflicts in the Middle East, you're going to have to address the Saudis and the Saudi promotion of terrorism around the Middle East. Every time I hear Mike Pompeo or John Bolton talk about Iran is the #1 exporter of terrorism, I just want to say full stop. Wrong, incorrect, lie, misinformation. Iran has always been afraid of and fighting against Sunni extremism, and has been fighting the Taliban long before the U.S. was even fighting the Taliban.
So there is a push emanating from Netanyahu in Israel, as well as Saudi Arabia, for a war with Iran. Why?
The Israelis and the Saudis are goading the United States on this because they really do want to see a military intervention in Iran. Israelis see Iran as their mortal enemy. Netanyahu really uses Iran as a smokescreen for what the Israelis are doing in Palestine.
Yeah.
So it is a way to just try to keep deflecting and saying, don't look at Gaza, don't look at the West Bank, don't look at what we're doing.
To what extent do you think that the demonization of Iran is a kind of feint to deflect attention from our own failures within the Middle East in the last 18 years of warfare?
If you keep this boogeyman there, that the problem is Iran, 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 that can be an excuse for why we haven't in almost 2 decades been able to defeat the, quote, ragtag Taliban, because Iran is there helping them. And of course, you go through every country in the Middle East and you can say that. It has absolutely nothing to do with reality, but it is a good excuse to say why the most powerful military in the world is not able to win a war.
What do you think the vision of Bolton and Pompeo is? Is it a hot war?
I think they want chaos inside Iran. I don't think they want to see U.S. troops fighting in Iran. I think they want to see Iranians fighting Iranians. And I think the Israelis and the Saudis would love to see a strong nation of 80 million people divided into a nation where they're killing each other. I worry that there will be some incident that happens in Yemen, in Syria, somewhere else, that will give the Israelis or the Saudis what they need to push the U.S. to do bombing inside Iran. And that is what worries me, because I think that could be the beginning of this effort to create the chaos inside.
So now we have this targeting of Iran, which is so predictable. You can go back to September 2000 and an organization called the Project for the New American Century. And you look at the people that were members of it, Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, and John Bolton. John Bolton, who is now the National Security Advisor to Trump, who's pushing this agenda against Iran, pushing the agenda against North Korea, pushing the agenda against Venezuela, etc., etc. September 2000, they produced a document in which they called for a regime change in a list of countries. What were those countries? Iraq, Libya, Syria, Iran, North Korea, leading to regime change in China. in relation to Iran and North Korea, people then said to me, see, you were wrong about Iran because they've got a deal now with Iran, a nuclear deal, it's all settled down. And I said to them, just wait. And they said, oh no, Trump's talking to North Korea now. It's all going to be sorted. And I said, just wait. Because there is an agenda. And if anyone tries to get in the way, then it is blocked so the agenda can unfold. We're having now all these sanctions being used as a weapon of war against all these target countries, not least China at the moment. And this is a prelude they want. Not saying they'll achieve it, but what they want is conflict, literal conflict with those countries. So it's a mass of deceit and lies which are designed for one thing, to manipulate this agenda into reality. And the elephant sitting there on the sofa all along is the far right regime in Israel. Who benefits from all this stuff in the Middle East, using American troops and British troops and other European country troops? Israel. Because what's playing out is the agenda laid out in September 2000 by the Israeli agency, because that's what it was, the Project for the New American Century. And when Trump came to power, all their dreams came true because Trump is owned by Israel.
Hablamos del Club de Bilderberg. Van a asistir 130 participantes de 23 países. Una cumbre a puertas cerradas entre los principales políticos, líderes del mundo, empresarios, dueños de grandes medios de comunicación, personas que toman decisiones, que miran el orden mundial, que buscan también más poder. Se enmarca dentro de un secretismo y un misterio completo. No se conocen en detalles los temas, solamente se conocen los principales tópicos de forma general. Todos dicen, aquí hay algo extraño, aquí hay sombra, no podemos saber. Es una influencia que intentan ejercer los más poderosos dentro del orden mundial.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like, I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like, we had entire training courses.
En una serie en la que hacía el papel de presidente de Ucrania, el cómico Zelensky disparaba contra los miembros del Parlamento. Hoy, en su toma de posesión, se ha conformado con dejarlo sin trabajo, disolviendo la Cámara y adelantando las elecciones.
He dedicado mi vida a hacer reír a los ucranianos. Los próximos 5 años haré lo que sea para que no lloren.
I will shortly leave the job. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
Well, just
Christian Barnard hat die erste bekannt gewordene Herztransplantation vorgenommen. Mit dem Ergebnis, dass dieser Mann nur 17 Tage gelebt hat. Ein Grund dafür war eben, dass man nicht darauf geachtet hat, dass Organe, wenn man sie verpflanzen will, lebend frisch sein müssen. Sonst kommt das Problem der Ischämie, das heißt, die Organe verfallen sofort und können dann nicht mehr verwendet werden. Nachdem das 1967 nicht so richtig geklappt hat, hat man 1968 in den USA eine Kommission ins Leben gerufen und hat dort diesen Hirntod regelrecht erfunden. Das heißt also, man hat festgestellt, wenn das Hirn gestorben ist, in Anführungsstrichen, dann ist der Mensch tot. Hirntod bedeutet, dass das Gehirn, das Großhirn, Kleinhirn, Hirnstamm und so weiter nicht mehr reagieren, aber der Blutkreislauf noch in Betrieb ist, wenn auch mit Unterstützung. Aber das Herz schlägt noch und die Organe werden noch durchblutet. Wenn dann eine Genehmigung zur Organspende vorliegt, entweder von dem Hirntoten selber oder wenn Angehörige zugestimmt haben, Dann werden Organe entnommen, bei schlagendem Herzen, indem der Körper vom Hals bis zum Schambein aufgeschnitten wird. Die beiden Körperhälften werden auseinandergehalten, es wird Eiswasser eingegossen, aber auf alle Fälle werden immer muskelentspannende Injektionen gegeben und der Körper wird auf dem OP-Tisch festgeschnallt, damit er sich nicht bewegt. Es ist ja auch so, dass nicht nur Organe entnommen werden, das kann man doch ankreuzen auf dem Ausweis, dass auch Gewebe entnommen wird. Und Gewebe, da denkt man, das ist vielleicht so ein Stückchen Haut. Gewebe ist der ganze Körper. Auch die großen Knochen, die Röhrenknochen, Oberschenkelknochen und so weiter, die werden entnommen. Wenn also alles erledigt ist, dann müssen die OP-Chirurgen, die Schwestern, müssen diesen Körper wieder versorgen. Nicht, denn der muss ja hinterher zur Bestattung freigegeben werden. Und da werden also aus dem Baumarkt Materialien genommen für die Augen, Glaskugeln, für die Oberschenkelknochen, Besenstiele und so weiter. Bis die Organe entnommen sind, bis sie wieder transplantiert sind. Das kann also viel Geld kosten, mehrere 100.000 Euro sogar. Und dann kommen noch weitere erhebliche Kosten dazu, weil dieses fremde Organ der Körper nicht haben will. Das wird abgestoßen. Das heißt, das Immunsystem erkennt da was Fremdes und möchte es wieder loswerden. Dafür gibt es jetzt Immunsuppressiva, die das Immunsystem ausschalten. Das muss man sich mal vorstellen. Ein Mensch ohne Immunsystem, was kann dem alles passieren? Da ist natürlich eine riesige Einnahmequelle für die Pharmaindustrie. Je nachdem, wie stark die Abwehrreaktionen sind, kostet das im Monat bis zu 4.000 Euro, nur die Medikamente, dass das Organ im Körper bleibt. Wenn das Organ dann doch abgestoßen wird, dann ist natürlich die Suche nach einem anderen fremden Organ und dann geht das gleich weiter. Wer also einmal damit angefangen hat, als Organempfänger, der sitzt in dieser Mühle drin. Mit den Immunsuppressiva und mit den Ängsten natürlich, dass das Organ abgestoßen wird. Statistisch gesehen weiß man, dass die meisten Menschen an Krebs sterben. Nicht, weil das Immunsystem ja nun gar nichts mehr machen kann gegen Bakterien und so weiter. Es gibt grob zwei Regelungen. Einmal die Zustimmungslösung. Das heißt, ich kann mich entscheiden oder zustimmen, dass ich Organe spenden möchte. Die zweite Regelung ist die Widerspruchslösung. Und das ist ein bisschen krass, weil dort definiert ist, es handelt sich um eine angenommene Zustimmung. Also wer nicht ausdrücklich widersprochen hat, der hat zugestimmt. Und es gibt in 2/3 der Länder in Europa diese Widerspruchsregelung.
Lucrative financial outcomes can be a factor in determining a brain death diagnosis. And many patients declared brain dead are perfect candidates for organ harvesting, a procedure that financially benefits the medical community. In 1985, after a series of seizures, Jenny fell into a coma and was declared brain dead. Her husband refused organ harvesting for Jenny, and she woke up 3 weeks later.
They took me to the hospital. I was unable to move, to speak, to open my eyes, but I was fully conscious and aware of what was going on around me. I had awake times and asleep times. And when I was awake, I understood everything that was going on. And one of the awake times, I heard multiple footsteps coming into the room. And one male voice saying, this one's a sad case. Young woman, 2 small children at home, her husband is being completely unreasonable. If he would just sign the forms, so many people could benefit from her organs. It was less than a week later I came out of the coma. I believe the physician was deliberately looking to harm me for some sort of benefit as an opportunity to procure organs. You cannot necessarily trust a diagnosis of brain death as being truly dead. One doctor's opinion of brain death is different than another. It's very subjective.
You can have almost any definition that you want for brain death. Accepted medical standards can be whatever the doctor says, can be whatever the hospital says. No one should be declared dead until we're as certain as we can possibly be that the soul has separated, that the life is gone.
The white helmets were effectively being accused of running organ trafficking operations. Civilians in specific areas in East Aleppo told me they were paid $2,000 for a dead body, and I think it was upwards between $3,000 and even more if they could get someone who was still alive to the border in order for their organs to be used. And then, of course, children have a much higher value. One woman in particular told me that her husband had been very lightly injured. He'd been taken by the white helmets to the border. He was brought back dead. But she said basically her husband was brought back with the familiar stitching, and as she described it, he was empty. More people started to tell me that if their children were lightly injured in an attack, they would hide them so that literally they wouldn't be taken to hospitals that they believed were being used for organ extraction or for basically forwarding children or victims on with the white helmets to the Turkish border. Doctors at the border would determine their viability for organ and tissue extraction. Why do we always see white helmets only running with children? Why do we never see the parents? Even prior to this, in 2016, there was a report put by the head coroner in Syria to the UN of the fact that there had been 18,000 children abducted for organ theft. So this is an ongoing issue. In Eastern Ghouta, one guy told me there were a series of hangars, and he said that was like an abattoir. He said that's where they extracted the organs. This organization is being financed by the British government, by the US government, by France, by Holland, by Canada, by Qatar. Are we funding an organization that is running potentially organ trafficking operations? Organ trafficking is not something that is generally done by an individual. It's a highly organized mafia operation. Human harvest from these wars is a terrifying and incredibly lucrative industry. When I look at who is behind them, who is funding them, and I'm not only talking government levels now, I'm talking the entire network of billionaire capitalists who are behind this organization promoting it. There has to be a reason for it. And normally what is the reason that drives these organizations, these globalists, to protect something is because it has value. Organ trafficking comes under what is called the red market, because it's not only organs. People tend to think it's just kidneys, livers. No, a whole body can be used. So the bone marrow can be taken, blood, tissue, hair. Actually, very little of the body is left. This is like some kind of horror story. It's an absolutely gruesome industry, but it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is one of the most lucrative industries in the world today.
What happens when a nation is thrust into a contrived, orchestrated civil war like Syria, or when an earthquake rocks a place like Haiti, or when NATO invades a nation like Libya? Refugees. Millions are displaced. Children are separated from parents on purpose. A human trafficker's delight, an organ trafficker's dream. Pure evil. The Lebanese Ad Dayer newspaper revealed that Turkish authorities are involved in trafficking the bodies of Syrian refugees who reach Turkish territories. The Turkish authorities transport young Syrian injured who enter their territories to hospitals in cars guarded by Turkish police and intelligence. The injured Syrians have their body organs excised after being anesthetized, and later they are killed, and the numbers are staggering. 18,000 Syrian children have had their organs harvested. Why is this being allowed to continue? Why haven't you heard about it? Why is the mainstream media silent?
Abril 3 del 2019, en pleno vuelo, un objeto en forma de disco sigue a una aeronave, una aproximación peligrosa, convirtiéndose en un riesgo para la navegación de la aeronave, que en estos momentos debe desplazarse a una velocidad de entre 700 y 900 kilómetros por hora.
El pasado 11 de abril, el diario británico Daily Mail publicó la extraordinaria evidencia de 6 misteriosas aeronaves esféricas que volaban peligrosamente cerca de un vuelo comercial, que emitían una luz pulsante entre verde y amarilla.
Caramba, interessante, né?
se puede ver con toda claridad cómo del cráter Aristarco, el más brillante de la Luna, salen dos objetos disparados hacia el espacio.
I was a child participant in DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space program at the time of the emergence of different forms of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. It's been concealed from the American people that time travel existed as the secret twin, essentially, of Project Manhattan, the atomic bomb project. Nikola Tesla's papers from his apartment in the New Yorker Hotel in Manhattan, New York, that had been seized by the War Department upon his death on January 7th of 1943 were never lost. 25 years later, by 1968, the U.S. defense community had pioneered Tesla teleportation, which is the capability to open up a vortal tunnel in time-space through which somebody can pass. And by the fall of 1970 had found a way to adjust the time of the arrival of the individual via teleportation, backward or forward in time. So I was brought in to Project Pegasus as a child participant. We were experimentees. They told us that the reason they were having us teleport, beginning extensively in the summer of 1970, which was the summer after our third grade, was that they were testing the mental and physical effects of Tesla teleportation on children, basically from stable, well-provisioned backgrounds, kind of like the analogy would be to the children of the president and vice president. In the event that they implemented teleportation on a limited basis to move our executive branch officials around the world, they wanted to know what the physical and mental effects on their children would be. I mean, I visited, when I was a child in Project Pegasus, the year 2045. And in that 2045, a time that today is only 30 years in the future, Tesla teleportation was so ubiquitous that teleport stations are as commonplace as elevator landings are in our civilization. Nikola Tesla discovered a form of energy that he found was latent and pervasive throughout the entire physical universe. He called it radiant energy. When you array radiant energy and somebody jumps through it, their inertia opens up a vortal tunnel in time-space. There is no transformation of the individual, and the individual does not have to be traveling at the speed of light. So there's been a 45-year cover-up of a transport technology that we could have used to literally allow the average person, the everyday citizen, to overcome the limits of time and space aboard our planet. Tesla's greatest contribution to applied science was the discovery of a form of energy that allows us to bend time-space to the point of opening tunnels up in it through which we can pass uninjured across great distances. Time is linear in the sense that it's sequential and things change and go in a particular direction. But time travel is not. Time travel is non-sequential. So the paradox in that case is that we can't change the present by going back and quantum engineering the past, because when we visit the past, we're in the original past event. And I'm speaking out now because Tesla teleportation was not implemented on a mass level. In other words, the tragedy of the secret history of US time travel is that Tesla teleportation was weaponized from the very time it was obtained by the Defense Department in 1943. These devices, which could revolutionize our civic infrastructure, which Tesla had been secretly working on from 1899 forward, which he kept secret even during that last kind of strange 15 years of his life where he was just ostensibly raising pigeons, he was actually keeping this information secret. Nikola Tesla was the greatest applied scientist in the history of our great American civilization. He was more ethical than Westinghouse and Edison. Edison cheated him when he first came to the United States. I'm here to tell you that this great Slavic American immigrant inventor does become the principal figure in our human civilization because he invented the technology, the civic infrastructure of the 21st century, and we deserve to be living in the world that our grandfather's generation invented through the genius of people like great heroes like Nikola Tesla.
quantum physics changed our perception of reality over 80 years ago. Surprisingly, this new viewpoint has yet to be incorporated into our current biology model.
The main problem with the current biological model is that it's reductionist and mechanistic. That means, first, it tries to explain everything in terms of little bits, generally molecules, because they're the smallest things in organisms. And secondly, it tries to treat the organism as a machine that works simply in terms of physics and chemistry.
As you see, the doctors began to look at how each individual cell works, and they got down to the cellular level. That's all been done for 100 years. Great, we understand it a lot. But we don't understand how the cells talk to each other and how they deal with information.
Many cultures of the past have explored the energetic system of the body. Today, researchers theorize that the body does have a field of energy, known as the morphogenic field, or the body field.
There's a hierarchy of fields organizing our bodies. There's an overall field, and then there's subsidiary fields, sort of modular fields for arms, legs, and the different organs.
It now appears that our bodies are connected to the field, but what is the mechanism for this intercommunication? How can this connection take place? One possible solution? The biophoton. Biophotons are weak emissions of light emanating from the cells of all living things.
We know we're sending out information with biophoton emissions because people like Fritz Popp have discovered that we are sending out tiny currents of light.
We started to look for these photons. I knew from the beginning on that it must not be very high intensity, but it was clear that one should have these photons at all in a cell.
Professor Popp theorizes that these biophoton emissions may be controlling our body's metabolism.
Molecules cannot regulate themselves. They have to have a field, more or less. So the photons should be the carrier of the information which is necessary to regulate the metabolism.
These biophotons create a dynamic, coherent web of light within our bodies. Our bodies are constantly emitting light in the form of biophotons. Are these biophotons the body's control mechanism? Isn't that the function of our DNA, our genes? Apparently, the control system of the body is not genes or chemistry, but information, which seems to be available in the body field. Is it possible to put new information into the body to affect wellness? That is exactly what a number of researchers are doing. The body appears to be constantly connecting with information within itself and with information in the field.
The body is always looking for coherent systems, looking for information interchange between all cells he has, so that every single cell knows what's on. That's a large information system. And some people say that illness is just a lack in the information system. And I suppose they are right.
So when we make an emotional shift, let's say we go from frustration to joy, those kind of emotional shifts, about 1,400 biochemical changes instantly go off in the body. Now, if you think about the course of one day, all the emotions that we feel, the highs and the lows, you can see that emotions are creating lots and lots of changes in our physiology. So it makes a lot of sense to start paying attention to the emotional diet as well as to the physical diet. Strong negative emotions just degenerate us. Positive emotional states regenerate us. Become simple math. Feel more love, more care, more appreciation, and your health's got a better chance of improving and staying that way.
Our thoughts create our body moment by moment. When we think positive thoughts, we release certain chemicals into our body. When we think negative thoughts, we release negative chemicals into our body. And those have a profound effect on how the cells are behaving and how the nutrition is being used. So the most important thing for people to do is to take total responsibility for their health, not to think that it comes from outside themselves or that somebody else can give it to them. And by taking total responsibility, that may mean they have to start with choosing the thoughts that they think, so that they are in a good state of mind.